Thick southern rain hammered against the metal roofs of the small Alabama neighborhood, the kind of storm that made every window tremble and every streetlight flicker like a dying candle. In the aging Calloway house at the end of Willow Bend Road, the weak yellow bulb in the kitchen swayed slightly, casting uneven shadows across the cramped room where 13-year-old Mira Calloway stood shaking. Her wet hair clung to her cheeks, and her fingers twisted the hem of her oversized t-shirt as if she were holding onto the very last piece of safety she had left. Her father, Raymond Calloway, loomed over her, his voice thundering so loud it could have drowned out the storm. "Say it again," he barked. "Say it clearly so I know I heard right. What's inside your stomach?" Mira lowered her head. She couldn't force the words out anymore. Her throat had closed, her pulse a drum of panic. She felt 14 years older, not 13. Her hands trembled so badly she had to tuck them behind her back. Her mother, Marjorie, stood beside the sink, one hand covering her mouth, the other gripping the counter until her knuckles turned bone white. "Lord help me," she muttered. My daughter is pregnant? What will people say about us at church? At school? At work?" Mira tried to speak. I didn't know what to do, but before the sentence finished, her father slammed his hand on the table. A glass fell and shattered, tiny shards scattering like glittering accusations. "You made a fool out of this family," he roared, pointing a shaking finger inches from her face. "You embarrassed me. You embarrassed your mother. You embarrassed everyone who ever trusted you." Myra's tears mixed with the sweat on her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. She stood still as if movement would trigger an even larger explosion. Her mother whispered, voice cracking, "Why? Why would you throw your life away like this? You re-13, Mira. Tierten." "I didn't mean," Mira choked on her own breath. "Didn't mean." Her father jumped in. "Children don't just accidentally get themselves into this. What kind of girl are you turning into?" The storm outside howled. Inside, everything went still. Raymond stepped back, inhaled sharply, then pointed to the front door with an expression that felt colder than the rain. "Get out." Mira blinked. "Dad." "Out of my house. Right now. I don't have a daughter who does something like this. Go before I call the sheriff and have them escort you out." Her mother did not intervene. She didn't reach out, didn't hug her, didn't even look at her. Mira lifted her eyes, desperate for even half a second of kindness, but all she saw was shame and fear of small-town gossip, fear of neighbors whispering, fear of losing reputation. "Please," Mira whispered, her voice breaking. "Mom, please don't let him." "Just go, Mira," her mother said softly but firmly. "Please. Before things get worse." That was the last thread holding Myra's world together, and it snapped. She backed away, her legs barely holding her up. She grabbed only the torn canvas backpack she used for school and stuffed inside a thin sweatshirt, 2 old t-shirts, and a cracked hairbrush. She didn't take shoes, there was no time. The storm hissed through the doorway as she stepped outside, and before she could look back, the door closed behind her with a violent slam. Mira stood alone on the porch, rain soaking her instantly. Lightning carved jagged lines across the sky. Dogs barked somewhere down the block. A neighbor's curtain shifted, someone peeked, then quickly pulled the blinds shut. Word had traveled fast already. This town loved gossip more than truth. Barefoot, her toes sinking into cold puddles, she walked. Houses blurred behind curtains of rain. Every step sent tiny rocks and debris cutting her feet, but she kept moving because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant collapsing. She walked until the houses grew farther apart and the old St. Mary's Chapel appeared ahead, the only quiet place she knew. Its white paint had peeled after too many storms, and the wooden steps creaked under her weight. Mira climbed them slowly and sat under the narrow overhang. The rain still hit her from the side, but at least it wasn't a full assault. She hugged her backpack to her chest. Hunger gnawed at her stomach. Fear churned like a second storm inside her. For a while she just stared into the darkness, listening to her heartbeat echo strangely in her ears. Cars passed but didn't stop. Someone splashed her with muddy water. A pair of teenagers pointed and whispered before hurrying away. This town, her entire world until tonight, had no place for her anymore. Eventually the cold became unbearable. Mira pushed herself up and wandered behind the chapel, where an enormous oak tree stretched its branches like a sheltering hand. Beneath it sat an old wooden bench that had once been used by the church's gardeners. She crawled beneath the seat, knees to her chest, trembling non-stop. Her hands instinctively pressed against her belly, not large yet, but unmistakably there. She whispered into the darkness, "I'm sorry. I don't know what to do. But I promise I won't let you die. I won't leave you. Even if everyone leaves me." Rainwater dripped through the wood above her, cold as needles on her skin. Hours passed. She drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes she woke to thunder, sometimes to voices of early morning vendors setting up their stalls nearby. No one approached her. No one asked why she was there. To them she was a problem too heavy to lift. Thin voice. Soft. Worn. Touched with age. "Sweetheart? You all right down there?" Mira blinked through the haze. Someone was bending beneath the bench, holding a small flashlight. It was the face of a stranger, deep wrinkles, silver hair tucked under a rain hood, eyes warm in a way Mira hadn't seen in so long. "My goodness," the woman whispered. "You burning up." She gently touched Mira's forehead. Her hand felt cool and safe. "I'm Evelyn Hart," the woman said. "I run the little food cart at the farmer's market down the road." "What is your name, honey?" Mira tried to speak, but only a hoarse breath came out. "All right," Evelyn murmured, slipping her coat off and wrapping it around Myra's shoulders. "You don't have to talk yet. Just come with me. I won't leave you here." Mira wanted to refuse, wanted to say she didn't deserve help, but her body had no strength left. Evelyn lifted her gently, surprising for someone so small and elderly, and guided her through the rain toward a modest one-story home with a tin roof and warm light glowing from the window. When they entered, the smell of homemade soup filled the air. Evelyn guided her to a small cot, tucked a blanket around her, and set a steaming mug on the table. "Rest," she said softly. "No one's going to yell at you here. No one's going to throw you out." For the first time since the night began, Mira felt her breathing slow. She closed her eyes. Warmth crept back into her bones. As she drifted into sleep, she heard Evelyn whisper, "Whatever happened to you, child, you safe now. I promise." And in the quiet hum of that tiny Alabama home, Mira felt just for a moment that the world had not completely abandoned her. Morning came slowly to Evelyn Hart's small Alabama home, as if the sun itself hesitated to disturb the fragile peace inside. The storm had passed, leaving the yard soaked and glittering beneath a pale orange glow. Birds argued in the oak tree outside, but their chirping felt worlds away from the quiet room where Mira Calloway lay trembling beneath a quilt. Her fever had climbed overnight. Sweat dampened her bangs. Her breaths came shallow, uneven. If Evelyn hadn't found her when she did, the cold alone might have finished her. Evelyn, still in the same rain-soaked clothes she'd worn while searching for her, stood beside the bed stirring a bowl of oatmeal. She checked Myra's temperature every few minutes, her brow wrinkling deeper with worry. When Mira finally opened her eyes, she flinched, half expecting her father's voice, the slammed door, the rain swallowing her whole. Instead she heard a gentle, unfamiliar voice. "Welcome back, Sweetheart. You scared me half to death.
Mira tried sitting up, but dizziness hit her like a wave. Evelyn quickly slipped an arm behind her back and helped her lean against the pillows.
You re-safe, Evelyn murmured.
You don't need to rush. Sitting upright brought back flashes of last night, the yelling, the broken glass, the rain drenching her feet, the ache in her stomach. She clutched the blanket tightly.
Why, her voice cracked.
Why did you help me? Evelyn smiled, though her eyes glistened.
Because you needed it.
And because nobody else did. She lifted a spoonful of oatmeal. Eat a little. You haven't had anything in your stomach for goodness knows how long. Mira hesitated, then accepted the spoon. Her hands were shaking too much to eat alone. The warm food soothed her throat, and she swallowed slowly, as if relearning how to be alive. After a few bites, she rasped, I should go.
Go where?
Evelyn asked gently. I don't know, Mira whispered, eyes filling. But I shouldn't stay here. People won't like it.
Evelyn set the bowl aside and sat on the edge of the bed. Honey, listen to me.
What other folks think has never paid my bills, never lifted my spirits, and sure as rain never guided my heart.
You re-staying until you re-stronger.
That's final. The firmness in her voice surprised Mira. She had never heard someone defend her so instinctively. Later that morning, after Mira had rested, Evelyn guided her into the kitchen, a small, warm space smelling of coffee, cinnamon, and old wood. The shelves were crowded with mismatched jars and faded recipe cards. A kettle whistled on the stove. Myra's eyes widened.
You make all this yourself? All my life, Evelyn chuckled.
I run a small food cart at the farmer's market. Biscuits, pies, cornbread, whatever folks are craving. Mira rubbed her arms nervously. I don't want to be trouble. You're not, Evelyn said. Trouble is a busted truck engine or my oven giving out in the middle of a rush.
You re a child who has been hurt.
Mira lowered her gaze.
The kettle clicked off.
Evelyn poured 2 mugs of peppermint tea and set one in front of Mira. As they drank, Mira studied the older woman's face, deep lines, soft cheeks, silver hair pinned neatly, eyes filled with something Mira had forgotten adults could carry, gentleness. Can I ask? Evelyn hesitated. Is there anyone I should call? An aunt, maybe?
A teacher?
Myra's throat tightened.
No. What about your parents? A long silence. They don't want me anymore.
She wrapped both hands around her mug as if bracing herself. My dad said he doesn't have a daughter like me. My mom didn't stop him. Evelyn felt her heart break cleanly in two. Well, she said, placing a hand over Myra's. Then until they come to their senses, which might take years with me. Mira looked startled. With you? Yes, ma'am, Evelyn replied. I've lived alone too long. I could use the company. That afternoon, Evelyn introduced Mira to the routine she'd built over decades. They washed vegetables, folded napkins, restocked flour, and sorted fruit baskets while Southern blues hummed from a radio older than both of them combined. Mira moved slowly, both from fever and fear, but she helped wherever she could. While they worked, Evelyn spoke in storytelling rhythm about her late husband, her years selling pies at fairs, her neighbors who borrowed sugar but never returned the jar, her garden that refused to grow tomatoes no matter how much she begged the soil. Mira listened, saying little. But her shoulders loosened a fraction each time Evelyn made her laugh. When evening arrived, they sat on the porch steps with bowls of vegetable soup.
The sun dipped behind the distant pine trees. Fireflies flickered like silent lanterns. Do you want me to leave once I am better?
Mira asked softly.
No, Evelyn said without hesitation.
Not unless you want to. But people will talk. They'll say things about me.
And about you.
Oh, they already talk, Evelyn said with a shrug. But gossip never put food on a single plate. And it sure never scared me. Mira swallowed.
I don't want anything bad to happen to you.
Sweetheart, Evelyn said gently, I've survived losing a husband, working 3 jobs, and outliving most of my friends.
A little talk shake me.
For the first time since the storm, Mira allowed herself to breathe deeply. She felt the tiniest spark of safety flicker inside her, a spark she didn't dare trust yet, but one she couldn't deny. The next day, Evelyn took Mira with her to the farmer's market. Wooden stalls stretched beneath strings of lights. Vendors called to customers. The smell of grilled corn and warm pastries drifted through the air. Mira kept close behind Evelyn, hiding beneath her hoodie, but she observed everything: the laughter, the bargaining, the colorful displays. When they reached Evelyn's food cart, a few regulars waved. Morning, Ms.
Hart.
You got those peach turnovers today? Evelyn smiled. Fresh out of the oven. But the warmth changed the moment people noticed Mira. Some stared too long. Some whispered. A pair of teenage girls snickered behind their hands. Myra's cheeks burned. She stepped backward until her back hit the cart. One older woman muttered loudly, "That's the Calloway girl.
The little pregnant one.
Lord have mercy." Another replied, "Figures Evelyn would take her in. She's too soft for her own good." Mira froze. Her pulse thudded painfully. She wanted to disappear under the pavement. Evelyn placed a comforting hand on her shoulder.
Ignore them, honey.
Folks like to judge because it keeps their own floors looking cleaner. But the judgment didn't stop. A man who had bought pies from Evelyn for years shook his head and said, "I'm sorry, Evelyn, but I can't buy from you today. Don't want that kind of influence around my grandkids."
Evelyn stiffened. My pie's haven, tea changed. Just my company.
Well, that's enough for me. He walked away. Mira felt the sting as if she had been slapped. "Maybe I should go home," she whispered.
I don't want to ruin your business.
Evelyn turned her gently but firmly.
Listen to me real close.
You didn't ruin anything. People ruin their own hearts when they choose cruelty. You hear me? Mira nodded weakly, though she didn't believe it yet. When they returned home, Mira sat at the small kitchen table picking nervously at a frayed thread on her backpack.
Ms.
Hart, she said quietly.
Why are you being nice to me?
You don't even know me. Evelyn washed her hands at the sink before answering. Because years ago, when I was hurting and didn't know which way was up, someone helped me.
A stranger.
Didn't ask for anything. Didn't judge. They simply said, "You deserve a place to rest." She dried her hands and sat across from Mira. And I promised myself that if I ever crossed paths with someone who needed the same, I wouldn't hesitate.
Mira pressed her lips together as tears gathered. I don't know how to be here without messing everything up.
Then good news, Evelyn said with a warm smile. You'll learn. And I'll help. That night, the house settled into calm. The ticking clock, the hum of the fridge, the soft patter of leftover raindrops created a lullaby Mira didn't realize she'd missed her whole life. She lay on the cot Evelyn had prepared with clean sheets and a fluffy blanket. One hand rested over her stomach. The baby inside her shifted a tiny flutter that always startled her. She whispered into the dark, "I don't know how to be a mom. I don't know how to do anything. But I'm trying.
I promise I am trying."
From the hallway, Evelyn's voice floated gently.
You're not alone anymore, sweetheart.
Get some rest. Mira closed her eyes and let the words cradle her. For the first time in what felt like forever, she fell asleep without fear. Winter arrived early that year, settling over the small Alabama town like a heavy quilt stitched with gray clouds and cold wind. The mornings grew colder, the nights sharper, and the air smelled faintly of burning wood from chimneys scattered across the neighborhood. Inside Evelyn Hart's home, warmth still lived, soft lights, homemade meals, gentle humming, but even warmth had limits when it brushed against a young girl's fragile heart. For weeks, Mira Calloway tried her best to blend into Evelyn's routine. She washed vegetables, folded napkins, wiped down the counters, and helped pack food for the farmer's market. She wore oversized hoodies to hide her growing belly, but nothing could hide the truth forever. Every day it became harder to button her jacket. Every night she lay awake, feeling the tiny shifts inside her flutters turning into kicks, reminders she could not ignore. The world outside Evelyn's little kitchen seemed eager to remind her too. At the farmer's market, judgment came in waves. No matter where Evelyn set her Carter-shaded corner under the oak tree, a sunny spot near the old courthouse fountain, whispers followed. That's her.
The Calloway girl. Barely a teenager.
What kind of upbringing leads to that? Poor Evelyn. Bless her heart for taking that on. The comments came with pointed glances, murmured gossip, or abrupt silence when Mira passed by. Some customers stopped buying altogether. Others walked to Evelyn's stall, looked her over, and turned away without a word. Once, as Mira placed fresh biscuits into the display, a woman wearing a church pin leaned in and whispered harshly, "You should be ashamed of yourself. Children learn from children, you know. My daughter doesn't need to see something like you." Mira froze, her jaw trembling. Evelyn stepped forward before she could speak. "Ma'am," Evelyn said calmly, "she's a child who's been through more than you know. And I'll thank you kindly to move along if you have nothing nice to say." But the woman scoffed and walked away, muttering something about lost morals. The sting lingered long after she left. Back home, Mira tried to hide her hurt. She kept her head down, her hands busy, her words short. But Evelyn saw everything: how Myra's shoulders sank lower each day, how her eyes reddened though she never cried, how she paused before entering the market stall, bracing herself as if preparing for battle.
One night, after closing the cart, Evelyn found Mira sitting alone on the back porch.
The sky was dark, save for a few dim stars peeking through the clouds. Mira held her knees to her chest, her hoodie pulled tight, her breath misting in the cold.
"Cold out here," Evelyn said softly. "Mind if I sit?" Mira shook her head.
Evelyn lowered herself onto the step with a small groan, the kind that came with old age. "Soup's on the stove.
Can warm you up." "I am not hungry," Mira murmured.
"That's a lie," Evelyn said gently.
A quiet laugh escaped Mira's small exhale of breath, not joy. "Maybe."
They sat in silence for a long while, listening to the creak of tree branches and the distant hum of cars on the highway. Finally Mira whispered, "Why do they hate me so much?" Evelyn turned, her eyes softening.
"They don't hate you.
They fear what they don't understand.
Fear turns people into fools.
They think I'm dirty. You're not. They think I chose this. You didn't." The wind brushed past them, cold and uninvited. Mira wiped a tear with the cuff of her sleeve. "Every time someone looks at me like I'm something wrong, I feel like maybe they're right." Evelyn gently placed her hand over Myra's. "No child deserves what you've lived through. What happened to you wasn't your fault." Mira didn't answer. She simply leaned into Evelyn's shoulder, a small, hesitant gesture, as if unsure she was allowed to. Evelyn wrapped an arm around her, not speaking, not filling the silence, just holding the girl who needed it. But comfort, no matter how sincere, doesn't erase wounds overnight. The next days brought even harsher stares. A group of older teenagers walked past the stall, laughing louder than necessary. "Hey," one boy called out, "you need a babysitter for the baby or something?" Another added, "Or maybe she just wants attention. Girls these days always exaggerate." Myra's chest tightened. She dropped the napkins she was arranging. Her hands shook too much to pick them up. That night, she cried quietly into her pillow. Evelyn heard the muffled sobs through the thin hallway wall but didn't enter. She had learned sometimes people needed space to let grief sit beside them. The morning after, Evelyn found Mira already awake, sweeping the kitchen floor aggressively, as if trying to erase every memory etched into her heart.
"You okay, honey?"
Evelyn asked. "I'm fine." But she wasn't.
And Evelyn knew it.
A week later, things reached a breaking point. At the market, a pair of customers approached the stall. One of them looked at Myra's belly, smirked, and said to Evelyn, "Isn't it irresponsible, letting a pregnant kid handle food? Seems unsanitary."
Mira's breath hitched.
The entire stall felt colder. Evelyn's jaw tightened.
That's enough.
She's clean, careful, and doing her best. But the message behind the woman's doubt, the disgust, the judgment landed harder than any words before it. Mira stepped back, overwhelmed.
The walls of the stall blurred. The noise of the market grew too loud, her heartbeat drowning out everything else.
She whispered, I need air." Before Evelyn could stop her, Mira grabbed her backpack and ran past the fruit stands, past the bakery tent, past vendors calling after her. She kept running until the voices faded and her breath burned inside her chest. She didn't stop until she reached the edge of the market's parking lot. There, she crouched beside a dumpster, hugging her stomach, gasping for air as if the world were collapsing. She whispered to the child inside her, "I can't do this. I can't keep being the reason people stare at MS.
Hart. I'm ruining everything."
That evening, Evelyn found Mira sitting on her cot, backpack zipped, jacket on, shoes laced. Her eyes were swollen but dry.
"You going somewhere?"
Evelyn asked softly. Mira nodded. "I have to. People are treating you badly because of me. Your cart is losing customers.
You retired all the time.
And you're doing all this just to take care of someone who doesn't deserve it." "Mira," Evelyn said gently but firmly, "look at me." Mira did, reluctantly.
"You are not a burden.
You are a child who needs a home. If my business suffers, it suffers. I can rebuild. But I will not send you out into the cold because people can't mind their own business."
Mira's voice cracked.
"I'm already showing I can't hide it anymore.
And when the baby comes, everyone will know.
They'll see you with me and think you're irresponsible. They'll blame you. Let them blame."
"I can let them hurt you," Mira whispered. Evelyn stepped closer.
"Sweetheart, they can't hurt me with their words. Not after everything I've lived through." But Mira shook her head slowly, pain tightening every muscle in her face. "They already have." Her voice was barely audible, but the words pierced deeper than any scream.
Evelyn's breath caught.
She saw the truth. Mira wasn't just trying to protect her. She was drowning in guilt so heavy it was pulling her under.
Evelyn knelt beside the bed.
"If you walk out that door, you'll suffer. You know that." Mira wiped her tears, forcing strength she didn't have. "I already survived once.
I can do it again." Evelyn's eyes stung. "Please don't do this."
Mira closed her eyes.
If I stay I'll feel like I am taking everything good from your life.
The silence that followed was the kind that breaks. Finally, Evelyn whispered, "Where will you go?" "I don't know," Mira said. "But anywhere that keeps you safe from people's judgment." Evelyn pressed a trembling hand to Myra's cheek.
You deserve love.
You deserve safety. You don't have to run. But Mira stood, clutching her backpack. "I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for you." She hugged Evelyn with the desperation of someone holding onto a life raft just 1 second before letting go. And then she slipped from Evelyn's arms, stepped into the cold night, and disappeared into the darkness as quietly as she had arrived weeks earlier.
Evelyn stood alone in the doorway, heart aching, whispering into the empty air. "Come home, sweetheart, before the world swallows you."
But Mira was already too far to hear.
The night mirror left Evelyn's home. The wind cut through the Alabama air with a sharpness that foretold a long, unforgiving winter.
Streetlights flickered over empty sidewalks, casting jittery shadows that stretched unnaturally across the pavement. Mira walked quickly at first, then slower as the weight of exhaustion dragged at her limbs. She clutched her backpack strap until her knuckles whitened. Her mind replayed Evelyn's voice, soft, trembling, pleading for her to stay. But Mira had made up her mind. She believed leaving was the only way to protect the woman who had protected her. By dawn, she reached the interstate bus station. A few passengers dozed on metal benches, their travel bags propped beneath them like makeshift pillows.
The ticket window flickered awake with fluorescent blue light.
Mira slid the handful of crumpled bills she'd taken from her jeans pocket across the counter. "One way?" the ticket agent asked. Mira nodded. "To where?" She stared blankly at the destinations scrolling across the screen: Nashville, Baton Rouge, Atlanta, Houston. Cities she had never seen. Cities where she wouldn't know a single soul. Cities big enough to swallow her whole, which suddenly felt like a relief. "Birmingham," she finally said. It was the closest big city, and she had just enough money to get there. The agent printed her ticket. When she boarded the bus, her feet were numb, not from cold but from fear that deepened with every mile they drove away from Willow Bend Road. Birmingham was louder, brighter, and colder than she imagined. The city hummed non-stop, cars honking, trains screeching, people shouting across crowded sidewalks. Mira pulled her hood tighter and walked with her head down, trying to disappear. She found a cheap room in a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. It smelled of cigarette smoke and damp carpet. The wallpaper peeled in curling strips like old skin, and the bed sagged under her weight. But it was a roof, and she had none else. She spent 3 days there, living on water from the lobby fountain and the leftover crackers she'd packed from Evelyn's pantry. On the 4th day, when the motel manager banged on the door and demanded payment for another night, Mira grabbed her backpack and fled before he opened the lock. With nowhere to go, she wandered the bus interchange and nearby streets until she stumbled upon a sign taped to a storefront window. "Help wanted, dishwasher part-time." Inside, a diner buzzed with morning traffic. The manager, a tired-looking woman named Marlene, hired her without many questions. She seemed too busy to care about the swollen belly Mira kept hidden under layered clothing. But after only a week, Myra's pregnancy became harder to hide. She moved slower, breathed heavier, and gripped the counters for balance. One afternoon, when a customer noticed her belly and whispered something to Marlene, the manager called her aside. "Mira, honey, I'm sorry," Marlene said gently. "I can't take the risk of having a pregnant minor working here. Liability.
If something happens to you on shift, I could lose my whole business."
Mira nodded, silent tears burning her eyes.
She understood.
She always understood. But understanding didn't stop her stomach from twisting in fear as she packed her things again.
Nights grew colder.
Mira started sleeping behind a laundromat, where the warmth of the dryer vents provided some comfort. But the noise, the smell of chemicals, the constant footsteps of strangers left her restless, panicked. Her baby kicked often, as if sensing her fear. Sometimes she whispered to her unborn child, I'm trying my best. Please hold on a little longer." One night, after a rainstorm soaked her clothes and her thin blanket, she woke with sharp cramps. Panic rushed through her too early for labor? Or just stress? She pressed her palms to her stomach and cried silently against the brick wall. "I shouldn't have left," she whispered into the night. "I shouldn't have left her." But shame kept her from returning. Shame, and the belief that Evelyn deserved a peaceful life, not one tied to a pregnant runaway girl. Meanwhile, back in Willow Bend, Evelyn's house felt unbearably quiet.
Mira's empty cart haunted her every morning.
Her absence echoed in every corner: the kitchen where she once chopped vegetables, the porch where she sat watching fireflies, the market where she had quietly helped pack pastries. For 2 days, Evelyn waited, hoping Mira would return on her own. On the 3rd day, she couldn't sit still. She taped a note to the front door in case Mira returned.
"I'm looking for you. Please come home."
Then she grabbed her coat, filled her thermos with coffee, and drove to Birmingham. She searched shelters, hospitals, police stations, bus terminals, even abandoned lots. She asked anyone who might have seen a pregnant girl with frightened eyes and a green backpack. Most shook their heads. Some didn't bother responding. But Evelyn refused to stop. Each night she returned home drained, chilled, grieving yet determined to start again in the morning. Back in Birmingham, Mira reached her lowest point. One evening she returned to her hiding spot behind the laundromat to find her backpack ripped open, her coins stolen, her clothes scattered across the pavement.
Her panic spiraled.
She collapsed to her knees, gathering whatever was left, her breath ragged. Her baby kicked again, strong, insistent. She curled around her stomach protectively and whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." But her body was failing. She hadn't eaten properly in days.
Her Vision blurred.
Her head spun whenever she stood too fast. She pressed her cheek to the cold ground, trembling as waves of nausea washed over her. That night, she convinced herself she might die. And she accepted it.
Until, somewhere between exhaustion and fever, she imagined a voice, soft, steady, familiar, calling her name.
Not her mother's voice. Not her father's. Not anyone who had abandoned her. Evelyn's. In reality, Evelyn had returned to Birmingham again that evening, following a new tip from a diner employee who mentioned a shy, pregnant girl washing dishes days earlier. Evelyn searched alley after alley, calling Myra's name into the darkness, her breath clouding under streetlights.
"Mira. Sweetheart, it's Evelyn.
Please answer me." Cars roared by. People hurried past. No one responded. But Evelyn didn't give up. She walked until her knees ached, her lungs burned, and her voice cracked. Then she turned down an alley beside a laundromat and froze. A small figure lay curled near the vents, half covered by a thin, soaked blanket. Evelyn rushed forward.
"Mira? Oh Gott, Mira."
She knelt, hands trembling, gently touching Myra's cold cheek.
The girl stirred, eyelids fluttering weakly. "Ms. Heart."
Mira whispered, barely audible.
"Yes, sweetheart, yes. I'm here. I'm right here."
Tears rolled down Evelyn's face as she pulled off her coat and wrapped it around Mira.
I've been looking everywhere for you. You scared years off my life.
I thought you'd be better without me. Evelyn cupped Myra's face with both hands. "You're wrong. You're the one thing I couldn't bear to lose." Something broke inside Mira, then walls she had built from shame, fear, and guilt. She sobbed into Evelyn's chest, gasping for breath as heat radiated from her feverish skin. Evelyn held her as if holding her own daughter. As if holding someone she refused to lose again. "We're going home," Evelyn whispered.
No more running.
"Not from me. Not from life. Not from love." And for the first time in weeks, Mira let herself believe it. She wasn't alone. She didn't have to be. Evelyn carried her to the car, tucked blankets around her, and as they pulled away from the city lights, Mira leaned against the window, eyelids drooping, whispering through tears.
"I want to go home." And Evelyn whispered back, "You already are."
The ride back to Willow Bend was long, slow, and quiet, broken only by the muffled sound of rain on the roof and the soft breathing of Mira, who drifted in and out of consciousness. Her fever rose and fell like a tide, and every so often she curled instinctively around her stomach, wincing at the sharp ache that traveled across her lower abdomen. Evelyn drove with both hands gripping the wheel, jaw clenched in worry.
Every red light felt like a threat.
Every stretch of dark highway felt eternal. She kept whispering prayers under her breath, prayers for strength, for safety, for forgiveness for not finding Mira sooner. When they finally pulled into Evelyn's gravel driveway, dawn was just breaking across the horizon.
The sky glowed dusty pink, a fragile promise of something better.
Evelyn rushed Mira inside and laid her carefully onto the cot in the warm corner of the living room. Mira shivered violently, teeth clattering, cheeks flushed with fever. "Sweetheart, I'm going to make you tea, then draw a warm bath," Evelyn murmured.
"Just breathe. You re-home now."
At the word home, Mira's lips trembled, and her eyes filled with tears she didn't have strength to shed. For the next 2 days, Evelyn barely slept. She kept cold cloths on Mira's forehead, spoon-fed her broth, rubbed her back during bouts of sickness, and whispered gentle words whenever Mira whimpered in her sleep. Sometimes Mira woke disoriented, asking where she was, asking whether she had dreamt being rescued. Other times she clutched Evelyn's wrist with startling strength, as if terrified Evelyn might disappear. "You're safe," Evelyn repeated each time.
"I've got you."
As Mira slowly regained clarity, her guilt returned just as strongly. "You shouldn't have come after me," she whispered. "That was never a choice," Evelyn replied simply. When Mira could finally stand with help, Evelyn drove her to the small community clinic she trusted. The nurse, kind, middle-aged, with a motherly tone, ran several tests, checked Mira's vitals, and listened carefully for the baby's heartbeat. A soft rhythmic thump filled the room.
Mira inhaled sharply.
Every time she heard it, no matter how faint, something inside her melted and broke and rebuilt itself all at once. "Your little one is strong," the nurse said with a warm smile. "And you're about 8 months along now, sweetheart. We'll need to monitor you closely, given everything you've been through." Mira nodded, but Evelyn placed a comforting hand on her back and answered for her, "We'll do whatever it takes." The weeks that followed became a rhythm, slow, steady, healing. Evelyn rebuilt her market stall one customer at a time. Some apologized for abandoning her before. Most pretended they hadn't judged her at all. A few still refused to come near Mira, but Evelyn paid them no mind. Mira helped again, carefully washing fruit, tying ribbons on pie boxes, organizing baskets of muffins. People were still judgmental, but a few kind souls began warming to her. One elderly man tipped extra and said, "Your girl works hard, Ms. Hart. Reminds me of my daughter at that age." The simple kindness nearly made Mira cry. At home, Evelyn transformed the spare room into a nursery-like space, nothing extravagant, just a clean corner with folded blankets, a second-hand bassinet, and a small rocking chair she'd inherited from her sister years ago. "You don't have to do all this," Mira whispered when she first saw it. "Oh, I know," Evelyn said. "But I want to."
Mira touched the edge of the bassinet, breath-catching.
For the first time, motherhood felt real, not a punishment, not a shameful secret, but something tangible and alive. As she lay down that night, her baby kicked under her ribs, strong and sure. "Hi, little one," Mira whispered. "I'm trying. I hope that's enough." Everything changed the night her water broke.
It happened just after midnight.
Mira woke to a sharp contraction that nearly folded her in two. She gasped, gripping the sheets.
MS. Hart. Shekrit.
Evelyn rushed in with wide eyes.
"Is it time?" Mira nodded, breathless. I think something is happening."
Within minutes, Evelyn grabbed the go-bag she had prepared weeks earlier: blankets, baby clothes, water, snacks, insurance papers, and helped Mira into the car. The drive to the clinic felt like seconds and hours at once. Mira clutched the seatbelt, her breath coming in harsh waves. "It hurts," she whispered.
"It really hurts." "I know, sweetheart.
Just focus on breathing.
I'm right here."
She squeezed Evelyn's hand so tightly that Evelyn's knuckles went pale. At the clinic, nurses rushed out with a wheelchair and whisked Mira to a small delivery room. Evelyn stayed by her side the entire time, wiping sweat from her forehead, whispering encouragements, refusing to let anyone separate them. Through hours of pain, tears, fear, and whispered apologies.
"I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry for everything." Evelyn held her. At dawn, when the sun painted the sky gold, a cry pierced the air. A tiny baby girl, fragile, pink, furious at the cold world she'd just entered.
The nurse lifted her gently and placed her into Myra's trembling arms.
Mira stared at her, eyes wide, lips parted, heart thundering.
The baby's fists waved weakly. Her small face, scrunched in protest, somehow made Mira laugh through her tears.
"She is beautiful," Evelyn whispered, hand over her heart.
Mira stroked the baby's cheek. "Hi, Lana," she whispered shakily.
"It's me. It's your mom."
The name she had carried silently for months, Lana, finally had a face. And Mira had a reason to live again. Bringing Lana home felt like crossing into a new chapter. Evelyn's kitchen filled with soft coos, late-night cries, bottle warmers, and lullabies hummed under dim lights. Mira moved slowly, carefully, but with a purpose she had never possessed before. Every morning, Evelyn made breakfast while Mira rocked Lana in the chair. Every afternoon, customers at the market admired the baby sleeping in her little sling. Every night, Mira whispered to her daughter, "Thank you for staying with me.
Thank you for giving me another chance."
Slowly, Willow Bend began to see Mira differently, not as the pregnant runaway, but as a young mother fighting to rebuild her life. A local newspaper ran a small feature about Evelyn's food cart and the young assistant who had overcome extraordinary obstacles. They didn't mention names, but word spread quickly. Within days, a reporter knocked on Evelyn's door asking to write a longer story about resilience and second chances. Evelyn looked to Mira for permission. Mira hesitated, then agreed. The article went viral across the county. Strangers donated baby supplies. A women's shelter offered support groups. Churches reached out with meals and clothing. But the most unexpected visitor arrived 2 weeks later.
A knock sounded on the door, gentle, hesitant.
When Mira opened it, she froze. Her mother stood there, Marjorie Calloway, hair unkempt, eyes red, shoulders hunched as if carrying years of regret.
"Mira," her voice cracked. "Sweetheart, you heard what happened. I heard you had the baby."
Myra's heart pounded so loudly she felt dizzy. Memories slammed into her, being thrown out, standing alone in the rain, begging her mother to stop her father from yelling.
"What do you want?" Mira whispered.
Marjorie swallowed hard.
"To see her. To see you."
And to say that I'm so sorry.
Behind Mira, Lana stiert in Evelyn's arms.
Evelyn's expression was guarded but not hostile. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, Marjorie said, voice trembling. But your daddy he passed last month. And before he died, he said he regretted how things ended. And Mira, I've regretted it every day since you left. Myra's throat tightened painfully. You didn't come for me. I was scared, Marjorie whispered. Of the neighbors, of the church, of the town, but mostly of facing what I let happen to you. Mira looked away, tears blurring her vision. I needed you. I know, her mother said, breaking. I know, baby. I'm sorry. Lana fussed softly, and Marjorie's eyes filled with longing and remorse. May I? She asked shakily. May I see her? Mira hesitated for a long, trembling moment. Then, slowly, she stepped aside. Just enough for Marjorie to see the tiny bundle sleeping in Evelyn's arms.
She is beautiful, Marjorie whispered, tears dripping onto the floor. Just like you were.
Mira wiped her own tears before they could fall. This is Lana, she said softly.
My daughter.
Marjorie nodded. I'd like to be part of her life if you'll let me. Even if it's just from a distance. Mira didn't answer, not yet. The wound her mother left was deep, still bleeding, but hearing her speak with so much remorse carved a small, fragile opening in her heart. We'll see, Mira whispered finally. It wasn't forgiveness. But it wasn't rejection either. And Marjorie cried as if Mira had given her the world. That night, after Lana fell asleep, Mira sat beside Evelyn on the porch. Do you think I made the right choice letting her see Lana? Mira asked quietly.
Evelyn rocked slowly in her chair.
I think you made a brave one. Forgiveness don't have to happen all at once. It can be a long road. You get to walk it at your pace. Mira nodded, staring at Lana's tiny fists curled against her chest.
You saved me, she whispered.
Evelyn reached over and squeezed Myra's hand.
Sweetheart, you saved yourself. I just gave you a place to rest.
But Mira shook her head.
No. You pulled me out of the dark.
And I'll never forget that. The stars shimmered faintly overhead. The house glowed warm behind them. And for the first time since the night she was thrown out, Mira felt something she thought she would never feel again. Hope. And it was real. Spring arrived in Willow Bend like a shy guest, tiptoeing in slowly, letting warm breezes slip through cracked windows and nudging stubborn flowers awake. The harsh winter that had nearly taken Myra's life now felt like a distant memory, but the scars it left, inside and out, remained tender. Still, the house on Willow Bend Road had never felt more alive. Baby Lana filled every room with soft coos, tiny hiccups, and the occasional ear-splitting wail that sent Evelyn and Mira scrambling in a sleepy panic. Evelyn joked that her bones were too old for midnight feedings, yet she always rose from bed before Mira could even blink. Mira, meanwhile, spent her days learning motherhood one breath at a time, learning how to hold Lana when she cried as if her heart were breaking, how to tell the difference between hunger and discomfort, how to measure formula without spilling it everywhere, and how to hum soft melodies that seemed to calm them both. It wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect. But it was hers. And it was real. The market stall Lana's table, as Evelyn had proudly renamed it, grew busier each week. Customers came not just for the food but for the story behind it. Some brought gifts for the baby. Some offered hugs, or whispered encouragements to Mira as if afraid the girl might break if spoken to too loudly. But not everyone's heart had warmed. One afternoon, as Evelyn set out trays of peach cobbler, Mira strapped Lana in a sling and stepped into the fresh spring air. A group of women near the produce stand eyed her the way some people look at pests, annoyed, suspicious, silently accusing. That girl should be in school, one of them whispered, not quietly enough. Her mother must have raised her terribly. I heard she doesn't even know who the father is. Mira kept her gaze on her shoes, breath tight. They didn't know the truth. And even if they did, they wouldn't believe it. Evelyn overheard and stepped out from behind the cart, wiping her hands on her apron. Ladies, she said with a sweet but unmistakably sharp tone, if you have that much energy to spend talking about a teen mother working hard to rebuild her life, you're welcome to join us and help unload these crates. The women scowled and walked away. Mira bit her lip, torn between gratitude and shame.
MS.
Evelyn, you don't have to defend me every time. Oh, I'm not defending you, Evelyn said. I'm defending decency.
Mira laughed softly, shaking her head.
That's the same thing. At home, evenings were a mix of comfort and chaos. Evelyn cooked while humming old country songs, Mira walked Lana around the living room to soothe her cries, and sometimes Marjorie cautiously visited, always knocking softly, always asking permission to come in, always bringing something for her grandchild, diapers, tiny socks, a crocheted blanket she'd spent weeks stitching. The first time Marjorie held Lana, she cried so quietly that Mira almost didn't notice the tears. She looks like you did, Marjorie whispered, brushing a thumb over Lana's cheek.
Except you cried louder.
Mira didn't know what to say. Compliments from her mother felt unfamiliar, fragile, like something she shouldn't touch too quickly. Their relationship became a slow dance of rebuilding, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Some days they spoke easily, some days Mira couldn't look at her mother without feeling 13 again, thrown out into the cold. Yet she didn't close the door on her. Not this time. Maybe time had not healed everything, but it had softened some of the edges. Then came the interview request. A young journalist from a local news station contacted Evelyn after hearing about the viral story online. She asked if they could film a small feature on women supporting women and unexpected family. Evelyn looked to Mira immediately.
This is your call. Only yours.
Mira stared at her baby's sleeping face, then nodded slowly. If my story helps someone who feels the way I did, then yes. The day of filming arrived like a whirl of nerves. Mira wore a simple blue dress Evelyn had bought for her years ago from a thrift shop. Lana slept in her arms, warm and heavy. Evelyn stood beside her, radiating reassurance. The interview began with gentle questions. What did you see in Mira that made you take her in? What gave you strength to keep going after running away? How do you two support each other now? But then a question Mira wasn't prepared for slipped out. And what would you say to those who still judge you or believe you shouldn't be raising a child at your age? Mira stiffened. Her gaze drifted off camera. Memories surged, whispers, stares, doors slammed in her face. Evelyn gently squeezed her shoulder. I'd say, Mira exhaled shakily, that I didn't ask for what happened to me. But I'm trying harder than anyone knows. I want to be a good mom.
I want my daughter to grow up loved.
People don't have to like me. They don't have to agree with my choices. But they don't get to define me. The room fell silent. The reporter blinked quickly, covering her emotion.
That is beautiful, Mira. Thank you.
The footage aired 2 nights later. What happened next changed everything. Support poured in again, letters, emails, small donations, volunteers offering to babysit, invitations to women's groups, church gatherings, community events. Several schools asked Mira to speak to students about resilience. But attention, like fire, spreads unpredictably. Some viewers took issue. They wrote comments online. She should be in juvenile hall, not on TV. She's probably lying about what happened. Teen moms just want attention. Those words hit Mira harder than whispers at the market ever had. One night she stood in the hallway holding her phone, tears blurring the harsh comments. "I shouldn't have done the interview," she whispered shakily.
"I made everything worse."
Evelyn approached, wiping flour from her apron, and placed a steady hand on Myra's back. "Sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong. People who judge others loudly are usually the ones hiding something themselves." "But it hurts," Myra admitted. Evelyn wrapped her arms around her. "Pain doesn't mean you did the wrong thing. Sometimes it means you did the brave thing." A few weeks later, tension in the town boiled into confrontation. A middle-aged man Myra vaguely recognized from church years ago stormed up to the market stall. His face was red, eyes burning with misplaced fury. "You should be ashamed of yourself," he snapped. "Teaching my daughters that reckless behavior gets rewarded with attention and sympathy."
Myra stepped back, heartbeat thundering.
"Sir," she began, but he cut her off.
"Pregnant at 13?
And now you're given interviews?
Praise?
Recognition? What message does that send?" Evelyn stepped forward, jaw set. "It sends the message that a survivor deserves support, not abuse." He scoffed. "Survivor?" She made her bed. "Enough," Evelyn said with a force Myra had never heard. "This child nearly died on the street because adults who should have protected her threw her away.
You want to teach your daughters a lesson?
Teach them compassion." The man hesitated, jaw clenched, anger wavering into something uncertain, maybe guilt, maybe shame, before he turned and stalked off without another word.
Myra sank onto a crate, trembling. Evelyn knelt beside her.
"Hey! Look at me." Myra did, eyes watery. "You're stronger than the lies people tell," Evelyn said. "And the ones who can't see that don't deserve to know you." Myra breathed deeply, letting those words settle like warmth in her lungs. Life went on. Not perfectly, but beautifully imperfect. Lana grew, smiling sooner than most babies, recognizing voices quickly, clutching Myra's finger with surprising strength. Every milestone felt like a victory, every breath a reminder that hope could sprout even from the darkest soil. Marjorie continued trying. Some days Myra let her help with Lana. Some days Myra politely declined. Healing was not linear, but it was happening. And Evelyn aged more softly in the presence of new life. She laughed more, hummed louder, and sometimes, when rocking Lana, whispered prayers Myra couldn't quite hear. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and fireflies flickered in the yard, Myra spoke what had lingered in her heart for months.
"MS. Evelyn, do you ever regret taking me in?"
Evelyn paused, rocking chair creaking gently. "Not once," she said. "You gave me purpose with your arrival." "And Lana?" "She gave me joy. Regret has no room in a house this full of life."
Myra blinked back tears. "I don't know where I'd be without you." "Alive," Evelyn said.
"Healing."
"Because you stronger than you think."
Myra looked down at the sleeping baby in her arms.
"I want Lana to grow up kind," she whispered.
"Not afraid like I was. Not ashamed." "You're already giving her that," Evelyn replied. "You're giving her love." And for the first time since becoming a mother, Myra allowed herself to believe it. Allowed herself to imagine a future. Allowed herself to look past survivalland toward possibility. Spring melted fully into summer, and though shadows of judgment still lingered in Willow Bend, something brighter was growing too.
A family built not by blood,
but by choice. By courage.
By love stronger than fear.
And that love was only beginning to be tested.